Hello, and welcome to The Staffing Show, the only podcast that delivers tools, tips, and tactics from the staffing and recruiting industry's top executives and thought leaders. This episode is brought to you by Staffing Referrals, the only automated referral management platform chosen by smart staffing firms. Tired of wasting money on traditional job boards? Sick of reminding recruiters about promoting your referral program? Wish you could eliminate admin work spent tracking referrals and scheduling interviews? That's where Staffing Referrals comes in. Imagine transforming your entire talent pool into digital recruiters on behalf of your company. Think about how happy you'll make your team by eliminating wasted time spent tracking referrals and scheduling interviews. There's a reason that Staffing Referrals is one of the fastest growing software platforms in our industry. It's because staffing executives want to scale faster by automating recruiting processes. It's because with Staffing Referrals, you can actually see an ROI. And it's because our world is now more digital than ever, and your candidates expect you to keep up. Don't get passed by the competition. Stop missing referrals and start recruiting smarter. Get Staffing Referrals and improve your tech stack today. To claim one free month, visit www.staffingreferrals.com/show. That's staffingreferrals.com/show.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Staffing Show. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Chris Conrad, who is the Vice President of Sales at Textkernel. Chris, excited to have our conversation today. Thanks for joining the show. To kick things off, could you give a little bit of a background on who you are and how you got into staffing?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I feel like, what was the phrase? Like long-time listener, first-time caller? Yeah, so I got into the staffing industry back in 2013 when I was a new sales rep for Bullhorn and just haven't stopped. So since then, coming up on 10 years, I guess, by simple math. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing now. Like, who is Textkernel? What are you doing with Textkernel today?
Yeah, so little known fact, when I joined Textkernel back in 2020, we were actually owned by CareerBuilder. And I was brought on to develop a sales team for the North American market because we didn't have one at that time. We relied on the CareerBuilder sales team, and we knew we were going to get carved out. So the arduous task of being a part of CareerBuilder during that period of time where they were rapidly going headcount and spinning off companies, we divested in October of 2020. And so from that point on, we assembled and grew a sales team. And, we're up to, I think for total US headcount, we're close to about 20 employees now, which is fantastic. Something like almost close to 40% of our revenue comes out of the North American markets. So huge shift for us and a lot of growth we've had with Textkernel. And we've just been, just on the street. We have a great financial partner that helped us, with leaving CareerBuilder, Main Capital. With them, they've helped us make some key acquisitions, invest in our product line, invest in our people. It's been fantastic since. So, yeah.
How big is Textkernel overall? Because I know you said 20 in the US, but you guys are a much larger organization, right? Is that?
Yeah, we're about 200 globally. Yeah.
Awesome. So what is Textkernel? What problem does Textkernel solve?
Ooh, that's a good question. So within the staffing sector, we're primarily the search and match leader. So we are providing technologies that matches candidates to jobs to candidates, but on a high volume, right? So we really excel when you have really large databases, really large data sets, and really provide a lot of that capability, especially to the top end of the market. But really, when you kind of look at this as a whole, we're actually the global leader in resume parsing. So we parse something like 3 billion resumes a year. It's kind of wild, right? So most major job boards utilize us. Most major platforms, including Bullhorn, utilize us and all their properties. A lot of HR tech. Yeah. It's wild when you think about it, right? I was like, how many people are in the workforce globally? And obviously there's a lot of duplicates, right?
Yeah, I was going to say there's got to be, you must be parsing some twice. Otherwise you've got
yeah, right. That math don't make sense, right? Yeah. But so we do a lot of that. And so it's crazy. We're really foundational technology when you're talking about the HR sector. We're a great search and match technology to corporate, but within staffing, we're so much more because obviously the whole business revolves around finding great people and placing jobs. And so we're so much more of a mission critical platform within this segmentation. So it's what we love to do.
Awesome. Awesome. And I know you had mentioned that you guys also have some automation components and also have made some acquisitions over the last couple of years. I've known Textkernel for a while. These are some things that are a little bit new to me and I think might be interesting to the audience as well.
Yeah, totally. Our CEO, Gerard, has really kind of had his mission to, look for great pieces of technology that we can, bring into the company and really expand our share of wallet within customers, really expand our footprint within different ecosystems. And we recently brought on a fantastic company called Djibouti, kind of weird name, but fantastic nonetheless. So they're also based out of Amsterdam, and they're in the Bullhorn ecosystem. They do candidate engagement automation, and they have a fantastic integration with WhatsApp. So as you know, WhatsApp, not really big over here, but it's like, I think something like the penetration rate in like most Northern European countries is like 90%.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's fantastic. We've brought them into the fold. It's been like really synergistic. Their owners are just great people, super engaging. So and think about that. They're a small company. The speed of innovation, we're like, hey, can you add on SMS? Like, let's get some texting going on in here. They're like, yeah, give us like 2 months. Like, all right, let's get this thing going.
That's amazing.
So yeah. So we're excited about that. We've also acquired a back office solution. So they do time interpretation, invoicing, time cards. Actually, correction, not invoicing. They work with general ledgers for invoicing, but time cards, onboarding. And again, just another piece of technology that we see a lot of potential on, and the ability to internationalize it, right? It's where we see it's cool in this country. We see the building blocks. We've done a lot of analysis. We think we can take this thing and say, hey, let's bring it to Germany. Let's bring it to France. Let's bring it to the United States. Bring it to Canada. You just don't see that with a lot of technology in our industry. They really kind of stay within their zones. You see them in the UK. Maybe they come to the US. They are in the US. Maybe they go to the UK. But like, not a lot's going to Germany. Not a lot is coming from Northern Europe and going into the States. So that's a big thing that we're focused on.
That's awesome. And I didn't realize, I've always thought about the resume parsing as kind of your core, and seeing you guys branch out. It sounds like you guys do a lot more candidate engagement side of things as well.
Yeah. We do a lot in the HR tech side, that whole arena on the HR side. And what we see is candidate engagements it's huge in that segmentation. And it really hasn't moved as aggressively into staffing as what we have thought. I mean, there's a few players, obviously. You have Bullhorn Automation, does a great job. You have Sense, obviously, does a great job. But beyond that, there's not a lot else. Staffing Engine, they're making some great progress and what they do. Great people over there. But when you look at like the level of innovation, we think that there's a huge potential to really advance that within staffing, because so much of the problems that most of the industry has is, if you think about it, it's around engaging with the talent, whether it's, redeploying them, whether it's trying to, once you realize you can't monetize a candidate, that you stay engaged, make them feel that you still care, and you're still looking for positions for them. There's a lot of challenges that really, when you come down to it, it's about the ability to stay connected, but to add value, to the candidate experience.
Well, that's really great. And just kind of shifting gears a little bit, but I'm kind of going off of the Textkernel, but you and I were having a conversation previously, and we've known each other for years, and ironically are from the same hometown pretty much.
I know, it's crazy.
It was great. You had brought up this idea of silver medalist scenario, and it was a concept that I thought was cool, and I thought maybe some of our listeners would be interested in hearing a little bit more about that, the idea and what that means from your perspective.
Yeah. So, the 2 cents of it is that the silver medalist is that candidate that it's a great individual. They sound great. They're interested. They're engaged with you. They want to work with your company, but they just ain't right for that particular job, or maybe the hiring managers didn't connect. So you want to place them somewhere else. That's a big workflow or a big use case that we think about at Textkernel. It's like, hey, how do we get that next best person to find a job? We built a lot of tools, a lot of automations, like, hey, let's serve up, let's try to find matching jobs. So then you can say, hey, this is a great individual. Here's all the matching jobs. And we can take it a couple more steps there. And so when we talk about this, it seems, and you and I were talking about it, seems like a no-brainer, right? Of course, why wouldn't you
get
place
like a person,
great
get the
candidate,
person in line placed, right?
Yeah. But there's so many challenges within organizations in terms of ownership, right? And so we were I was recently working with a firm, and we were talking about, employing this kind of workflow step in there. And again, it was one of those things where it's like, oh, wait, well, how do we handle ownership of the candidate versus ownership of the job, right? Like who gets split on this and who gets split on that. And the technologies get to a point where we can auto recommend a candidate for these positions. And so it's a challenge for a lot of firms to successfully implement this, because it actually kind of means like changing a little bit of how you handle, ownership or compensation splits. Because in theory, if you have a great candidate, we can tell you, 5, 10, 20 jobs are all great matches, and then give backgrounds as to why. Like they're a great fit because of all these reasons, right? Go ahead and submit them. It is interesting. It's a little bit of a challenge for the unexpected reasons.
Yeah. And so basically it's the challenge is that the agency doesn't want to take whoever applied to, say you've got 20 people that applied for this job, the second person to the runner up, that recruiter now owns that candidate. And the other job you're going to be recommending might be under a different recruiter. And so the agency is basically like, hey, we have a problem with this because that's going to change the owner of this candidate. And that recruiter is going to be like, even though it's a better candidate experience and it's more revenue for your business, you're seeing agencies that are kind of holding back on making adjustments or adopting because of their internal processes.
Yeah. And, I think conceptually the leadership always understands it, but it's always the practical being like, all right, well, how do we handle this stuff? Because, you can have it where, it could be a different delivery team that's working on it. At the end of the day, it's all about compensating people for adding value. But then if the technology makes it too easy, then who is the driving force of it? But it is a curious thing. And I think that, as we think about the industry, and, I've worked with thousands of staffing firms over the last 10 years, and they're all unique, right? The concepts are always the same, but like the way that they operate, there's always little nuances of how the business is run, how they handle compensation, all that kind of stuff. And that kind of leads down to how do you segment the data, right? You wouldn't think that a commission structure would be your driving force for how you handle your data structure. But surprisingly, it does from time to time. At the end of the day, it's all about the money, right? So people are going to do what they're going to do. It's a different, or it's an interesting anomaly that you run into from time to time.
I always find it amazing. And also sometimes at different points in my career, I found it frustrating when you see like internal processes getting in the way of what's actually best for the end user or the candidate in this experience. It's like, what is the best outcome for the candidate? Like if you focus on that and just focus on that and then try to get everything else out of the way, I think that typically leads to better business outcomes. But so often you see the businesses get in the way where they're like, hey, well, this is how we do it. And somebody's going to get frustrated over here. And it's like, well, so I think that's happened.
I'm sure you experience that within your own business, right? Like as you're a leader, right? There's always something that they're, so everyone's always going to question like, hey, why are we going left instead of right? Yeah. And there's a reason, but sometimes, that reason gets lost over time. You're like, oh, well, maybe it's not the right way to do it anymore. Maybe we should reevaluate that. Yeah.
And one of the areas that we also talked about is, expecting technology to solve problems. Like you're saying right here, it's like, all right, I'm going to buy this technology and that's going to solve the problem that we have. And can be the case, but I think the change management component of it is such a key part of that.
Oh yeah.
Any lessons learned that you've seen over the year, best practices that you would share with the audience?
Yeah. Change management, right? Someone should teach a course on this one. I think this is the core thing, right? And you and I, we're always selling our technology, and at the core of our pitch is, hey, we're going to help you be more efficient, right? But then, after we sign that contract, we're all happy about it. We always kind of have that collective, you hold your breath a little bit, being like, ooh, I hope they adopt this thing correctly. And adoption's a two-way street, right? I've been a firm believer that it really starts at the leadership core. It's like, so, when you have a customer or your director, VP, CEO, COO, whatever it is of staffing firm, it's about making sure that you have the right processes in place, but then you're holding people accountable to that. You're holding yourself accountable to that, right? And you are making sure that, say, you just not, trying to solve this problem and then moving on to the next. It's like, hey, what's our 180-day strategy, right? Like, what are we doing in terms of measuring the success? Have we defined what success is? I feel like sometimes, you probably experience it yourself. The salesperson tells you what to expect, but you yourself as the buyer haven't really set like, what am I expecting out of this? Is this going to drive, the extra placement that the salesperson promised? Often not the case, right? And how do you measure that? So those are all the key things I always kind of look at and be like, all right, well, how can we help? How can we help our customers go through that process and kindly help them, like saying, hey, if you're going to do this, right, it's about ownership and also it's about leadership.
I mean, it might be a broken record on this one with the podcast, but the number of times I've seen a CEO get excited about shiny new technology, and I have done this myself. Go out and buy it and then hand it to your team and say, look, and the team's like, we don't need another thing. We're maxed out. Like that's not the problem we're trying to solve today. So I think the key is, one of many things with the change management is like getting buy-in across all levels of the organization and making sure that you have general excitement around it. Because if people don't want another thing and you're adding another thing, the adoption might not be quite as good as you want.
Yeah, siloed decision making, right? Yes. I mean, as a salesperson, you love that, right? You have the one buyer, well, you talk like to them.
The first stage of it, yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, we're not talking about the adoption part, right? One buyer, hopefully they buy a really long-term contract that you don't have to forget about it for a while. But no, I was actually just talking to a rep today. So my guy was kind of walking me through a evaluation he's working on. And so the buyer, so it's a technical buyer, so director of operations. So he's evaluating it. He's like, I love the technology. How do I sell this internally? So it's kind of strategizing a bit with my rep. And I was like, hey, it's a fantastic opportunity. He's asking you, like, how do I build consent internally? And so this is an opportunity for you to be like a real coach and real advisor on how to best, because you could just try to strong arm him into doing a contract and knowing that it's probably not the right way to go about it, right? The right way is let's build consent, let's build an evaluation, let's set success criteria. And if he's willing to listen to you on that, that's awesome. That's fantastic, right? Like, then you can set the stage for a successful implementation, set expectations, right? That's like best case scenario.
Yep.
Typically not the case, right?
It is. It's definitely something that takes practice and makes it, and with salespeople, I think, especially who are hungry to get something done. It's like it takes some discipline to step back and make sure that you're actually validating and vetting things on your end, as well as making sure
the horse blinders on. How often are you in the saddle from a sales perspective these days? I'm
relatively frequently, so I get
never got out of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you ever do. I mean, I'm sure at some stage you do, but I'm not sure if you do fully.
A lot of founders are that way, right? They're like, like chief salesperson, CEO, CSO, right? Yeah. Like any other hat going on. Gerard, if I asked him to do a demo, like he would be on it. Like it would like cancel meetings and like get onto it.
Yeah.
You gotta hold him back. You're like, no, like you got a board meeting. But he loves it. It's like, I don't think you can you can't turn that off sometimes, You gotta love that.
Yep. 100%. The other conversation that you and I had a little bit about that I thought would be relevant for this group is we're talking about ChatGPT. I know it's all the rage right now. It's a big buzzword, but I think there's a reason why. And you had some really interesting thoughts on kind of how to think about ChatGPT. Honestly, you had a very different perspective than anybody else I've talked to about it. And I have this conversation quite a bit. And I love so
it's like dinner party conversation now, right?
I mean, I bring it up. I talk about it too much, honestly. I'm like, I've been having fun with it. I'm like learning about prompt engineers. I don't know. Have you heard
there
of
you
that?
Go. I have no idea how to do it, but
Somebody, I have not looked this up. I do not know this is validated at all, but somebody told me that prompt engineers, people who know how to write good questions and good strategic direction to AI are getting paid like $200,000 to $400,000.
Oh yeah.
So, but with that, let's jump into what are some of the ideas that you had. What's your take on ChatGPT?
Yeah, it's the prompt engineers reminds me of like the Boolean black belts, right? Like you can figure out like a really good Boolean.
Was that a thing?
Oh yeah, Boolean black belts. Come on,
I didn't even know that. That's amazing. That's what it is. Yeah. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Well, there's a few people. You probably might find like a LinkedIn profile every now and then with someone that says it, but Boolean.
Yeah, no,
it won't die. That's a fact. No, but so our company is heavy on R&D, right? As much as I'd love to say that, we're a 199 person sales team, we're more like a 20 or 25 person sales team, and then the rest is like R&D and product and whatnot. And so I was, as we start kind of, this, ChatGPT started becoming a big thing, obviously, in Q1, we started getting a lot of these questions in the sales process. So, I had a conversation with our head of research, Mihai, incredibly bright guy. And the thing about Textkernel is that it's like the UN. There's like, I think 36 different nationalities or something that work at the company. So it's extremely diverse in that regard, and a lot of PhDs. And so as we're kind of going through, because, I'm playing around with it. What do I know? I love it. I'm like having it write emails for me. I'm having it work on presentations. I'm like, this is the best thing ever. I was like, so how are we gonna start using this thing? We're gonna start using this thing for parsing, and how are we gonna start using it for, skills taxonomies and understanding where the makeups of, jobs and candidates, which is really at the core of what we do. So as you kind of walked me through a bit, one of the great things about generative AI is that it's creative, right? So as you can say, like, you can come up with like biography, you can make it like sound like a pirate, right? I think that's a common thing that I've seen a lot of people do, right? And you're like, okay, great, which is fantastic. It's cool. It's all, but the problem is that when you are processing data, especially on volume, there's a concept. It's called hallucinations. It's a real term they use. So
I didn't know that was actually a term. I thought you
hallucinate.
I thought you said ChatGPT hallucinates to me, and I'm like, get out of here.
What? Yeah, it's on psychedelics. What can you say? So
it's on trend. It's on.
There you go. Right.
It's finding its inner consciousness.
It's still one with itself. So what it does is that it kind of comes up with something that's not there. It anticipates, or I guess hallucinates, right? And so we start seeing it happening with resumes. It'll do this every now and now. Again, has a high degree of accuracy, but it does it every now and then. And we spotted this even just doing, low volume testing. And so as we kind of mentioned in the beginning, right, we're doing 3 billion with a B parses. Like, what happens if it's hallucinating just, a fraction of a percent, right? Yep. How do you trust that data, right? And it's not about incorrectly or missing something. It's just fabricating, right? So it's dangerous in that regard. So it has a way to go from that perspective, but there's ways of incorporating it to leverage the creative aspects of it. But we can actually give it, we can supplement it with industry or domain knowledge and say, hey, listen, so for example, things that we've tried out with this. So we have, a very extensive taxonomy, which a word that I feel like no one outside my company ever uses, but basically we understand all the correlations of skills and how they, how they matter, right?
Yeah.
It's like a word you had in biology class, right? Yeah. And we have an ontology, which is another crazy word, but that's a correlation between professions and skills. And so anyway, so we have all this understanding, and because we've, like 15 years of training on this stuff, something like that. And we can incorporate that and say, hey, listen, ChatGPT, build a job description, incorporate these, known specified skills that are for this job. And then we know, just how it can talk like a pirate. It can start interweaving in the different skills that are required for that job description without kind of going off on a weird tangent.
Yep.
So it's a way of kind of keeping it in check. But the other thing that we also look at, which, you and I were talking about, is because you were talking about how you used it for checking your marketing material, doing a little legal review, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully you don't have developers that are checking code with it, right?
I'm asking them not to after our conversation. And anybody listening to this, listen to this next part, because this is I hadn't thought of this, and maybe I should have, but
I mean, there's a famous story about Samsung, right? There's a bunch of Samsung coders, I guess, we're using it to check code, which does a fantastic job doing, faster than a human would. But all the information you just gave to, ChatGPT and OpenAI, that's their information now. And Samsung started finding their code showing up on the internet. So that's what also OpenAI is not exactly open, right? So where's all this data going? So if you
fully open
provide
source.
it, you provide proprietary information, company information, hell, heaven forbid your own code, that's their data now, right?
Yeah.
And we haven't really sorted out that from a legal perspective of who owns it since you freely gave it away. That's a tricky one, right?
The example I heard recently of a use case with ChatGPT that is scary. I heard this and I was like, oh, this is cool. Maybe something I should look at for different things. Was the owner of a software company said, I want to train my team on this part of our software, but I'm not that great at training. Can you ask me all the questions you need to know about our software so that I can train my team? And I was like, that's brilliant. That's a brilliant use case for ChatGPT. And now I'm like, oh, that guy just gave up his entire, like all of the knowledge.
Very innocuous, right? Like,
yeah,
oh, he's like, oh,
yeah.
how hard could it be? And he's probably given up like all the documentation. Maybe
he's probably like uploaded all of the. Yeah. So like, be careful with using it with proprietary information because now it's
exactly
no longer. Now it's part of the AI.
Yeah, right. Well, we're starting to see laws come out, right? So the EU is always ahead on this stuff. So there's a lot of conversation about PII and how that's protected within this type of technology. Italy just outright banned it. That's so Italian. And the US is going to get there. There's we talked about this before. There's some weird law. There's the New York City came up with a law obviously before this about leveraging AI for matching and matching candidates. And it wasn't the best written. I think that they've delayed putting into action at least twice now. Because it's supposed to go into effect in January 1. They punted till April, and I heard it just got delayed again. And there's not really any kind of clear direction. How do you enforce this thing? Like what happens, right? And then who's it applied to? It's just New York City. So is it like a speeding ticket? Like, do I just ignore this thing because I'm out of state? But it's going to change. I think a lot of people are going to start realizing, hey, like we need to start getting out in front. I think we're going to see a lot of legislation coming out of various different states, probably California first, just knowing them.
Yeah, I think we need legislation around it. That said, I don't know what that is or how what it looks like. But
don't worry. The people you elected who are very up on technology will write a law that is clearly tailored, right?
Yeah, they've got it down. They've got
our elected officials got it.
They've got their finger on the pulse.
They're like, no, we understand technology.
Yeah, to check to see if we're alive.
and probably no lobbyists involved in that one either, right? So it's a crazy world we live in where the speed of it's just happening so fast. I was telling you this before that my analogy that I'm, as I'm currently now at visiting my folks, the way I kind of describe it to it, it's like a Model T moment, right? Cars existed beforehand. That's nothing new. But just the accessibility of it, that everyone can get access to this vehicle. Now everyone's driving it. Now you have a lot of cars on the road. How do you handle, who's on what side of the road? Are you going to put stop signs? Like we need to have laws in place, speed limits, right? So the availability of this stuff, of generative AI, because it's not just OpenAI, there's others. So the availability of it and the costs are coming down. And just now you can have it download on your phone app. Like, your parents can be just typing away in there, asking them questions, right? It has a lot of implications. And I think the accessibility of it is what's going to make it really necessitate some legal action or some legislation.
Well, and also I don't know what all it's going to disrupt yet. I know there's a lot of people that have thought a lot about that and have the ideas of kind of the order in which it's going to disrupt things. I wish I could remember the name of the company, but it was an education company that, or like an educational resource. Was it?
Yeah, or Check, right?
Yeah, it might have been. Was it the one that their like revenue is down 50% or something like that?
Because, like closed up or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was basically like students are going to ChatGPT to get papers written and not to that site anymore. And it's like immediately, it's like huge impact overnight. And we're going to see more of those moments. What they are, I don't know, but it's interesting. So
yeah, I can't imagine being like a high school teacher right now. Asking people to make a book report. Oh, that's probably too young, but like a history report or something like that. You're like, oh my God, like how do you tell if it's plagiarism, right? That's the ability of generative AI, right?
Yeah. And then you can ask ChatGPT if it's plagiarism, but will it? Exactly. Good luck.
Right? Oof, good luck. Yeah.
So with that, kind of jumping back, this is a good conversation around kind of the future of AI and where things are going. Where do you see the staffing industry heading in the next 3 to 5 years? What are some of the major trends that you see happening that are impacting staffing today with AI? I know we talked about that a little bit, but what are some of the other areas?
I think you were at the SIA conference, in March. I want to say there was, I was talking to someone who was attending the sessions. He made a remark about how there's still sessions about the digital transformation. Like there's still people talking about digital transformation, right? Digitizing records and getting out of paper, right? And I'm like, really? I remember that from, again, 10 years ago. The reality is that a lot of the industry, the way we see some really advanced companies are doing really amazing things. They're investing heavily in technology. And they're figuring out new and creative ways, to automate and in different ways of, changing their business model, their delivery model. And then we see, a lot of, for lack of a better term, like lifestyle businesses, where maybe the owner just doesn't necessarily want to invest a lot. Their business is doing great, cash driver, but, there really isn't an incentive to grow it. And so it's just steady, right? So they just go, makes money, they're successful. There might be a local or regional player. So when we look at that, I think we're going to see that bigger divide where technology is going to play a bigger role on deciding who's a winner and who's a loser. One of the interesting conversations you have is, despite how much recruiters are like the foundation of the industry, it seems that there is a desire to remove the recruiter or minimize the recruiter as much as possible. Like if I had $1 every single time I said, like, oh yeah, we could just, so the recruiter doesn't have to do that, right? Or the recruiter doesn't have to engage with that person. Like, all right, well, what are you expecting the recruiter to do? I think automation is going to continue to play a role in the sense of reducing workflow. But I think really at its core, what is the recruiter going to do? That's the question. It's to have relationships, right? At the end of the day, there's going to be candidates that don't want to interact with a chatbot, or they want to be held through the process. They want to be coached and advised on how to land that job. I think that's the key role. I think everything else in terms of, tracking data, screening, onboarding, any kind of financial aspect of the business, that's all going to be automated, I believe. But truly automated, not just like, hey, we're going to take it from 10 steps down to 5 steps. That's my personal belief, that it's going to be that slow trend, even though there's a lot of cool buzzwords out there. I really don't think most of the industry is going to latch on to generative AI just yet. We'll see. My hunch.
Yeah, and I think you're completely right there. And I feel like the automation trend is going to continue. On the recruiter side of things, it is funny. And it's funny that when you brought that up, that like, it's like, all right, well, all these staffing agencies, the core of their business, how they got here, it was having a great recruiting team that they love and that's family and that they care about. And then so many staffing agencies are like, all right, well, how do I automate all of that away?
Yeah, right. And they shut the door and you're like, all right, listen.
Yeah. And I
love them, but
yeah. I feel like the agencies, you brought up the fact that not everybody's going to want to chat through OpenAI. I think the same thing is, it's like when you look at the role of recruiters, it's probably going to evolve into like professional consulting. It's like almost like a career coach, a consultant, something where you're actually finding value beyond answering questions about what job or the like salary, and figuring out how do you create that more value there. I also, and I've broken record on this one with the podcast too, but I think so many staffing agencies could really benefit from thinking about segmenting their database, or just defining like, here's who we want to serve and here's how we're going to serve them. Because if you look at like the travel industry or really any industry, there's all segments in every industry. There are going to be people who want to have a human relationship that work with your staffing agency. And there's going to be people who would avoid it at all costs that work with your agency. How do you serve both of those models and let people choose the path that's best for them without being, insane processes around it? So,
yeah, I totally agree. It's funny because we've had these questions internally, and we've adopted a self-service pathway for customers to buy. This was over a year ago when we made an acquisition of the Sovereign solution. They had a great self-service portal. We saw that, we doubled down on it and added a bit to it. And what we learned was, it was really fascinating because, again, like we had the sales process where it's like, hey, high engagement, your standard, like, hey, we're going to high touch, we're going to walk into the process. And then, then we had this other one where it's like self-service. And we learned that with self-service, to put some context around it, it was the ability to buy, the component technology and to develop on it. So if you're a developer or you're building, let's say you're building an ATS from scratch, right? You would use these developmental, use our APIs. You can leverage, the parsing, the skills, the search match, you can embed it all. And so we get these developmental partners on here. And so what we learn is that, like, one, a lot of people don't want to engage with salespeople, or at least until they're ready. And so what they do is, especially, and these are developers that we run into. So it's a personality type. So product managers, developers, CTOs, they don't want to interact with salespeople. They want to play with it first. So we give them access to the APIs, we give them documentation, they play with it. And then we interact. We wait for a period of time, and that's when we can add value. Because we learn is that they want to touch it first. They want to play with it hands off. And I was explaining this in one of our quarterly business reviews with our other department heads. And I was asking our CTO, or CPO, sorry. And I was asking him, like, hey, do you like interacting with salespeople when they're trying to sell you technology? And he's like, I hate salespeople. He's like, I never want to talk to salespeople. Just give me the APIs. And I'm like, that's exactly the type of buyer that we set up with this for. And it works perfectly. So we have these two different models where if you want self-service, fantastic, go that route. We're going to figure out ways to add value as a salesperson. And that's a high bar, not just selling them something, but you have to, understand their use case and be able to give them additional guidance. But then if they want, for segmentations like staffing, for example, they want to be sold, usually. And so we have to have that track. I think that that's going to be something that the staffing industry is going to have to adopt more, where they have the ability to, create a fast lane, if you will, or a low touch lane, and then a high touch scenario. And so allow for those different types of candidates. Again, especially if you're servicing IT versus, I think travel nursing, I think that's a low touch. I have a buddy that does, he runs a travel nursing team. They don't ask a lot of questions, but when they do, you gotta be there. He'll get questions like at all hours, right? Weekends and whatnot. Whether that could be automated, I don't know, right? But that's just a reality. Some segments need it. Some segments probably don't.
Yeah. When I think even within travel nursing, it's like there's going to be some nurses who always want to talk to somebody, and there's going to be some who never want to and like just want the highest rate, get me on my way. Those realities live within each vertical, and figuring out how to manage that is definitely a key thing going forward. With that, we're going to jump to the personal questions, kind of the speed round at the.
There you go.
What advice do you wish you were given before entering the staffing industry?
Oh, wow. I feel like I had this conversation a couple of years ago when I was first I was mentoring some people on it. It's, they're people. The owners of most staffing firms, they started the company. They're your classic founder. They're involved in all aspects of business. They love being sold, but then also they love to get intelligence about the industry. It's a small world, but when you're talking to a lot of different staffing firms, you probably have interacted with more of their competitors and counterparts than they ever have. Because none of them go to conference, none of them talk to their competitor, or they don't have a lot of connection space. And so you can actually add a lot of value just by having conversations about the trends you see, what's going on in the space, how you can add that value. And they really, most of the CEOs and executives I worked with truly value that. And that's something that's really unique. I've sold in other sectors, and you just don't get that in other sectors other than staffing.
That's great. Good insight. And in the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
Where'd you get this? Like a fortune cookie somewhere? A tricky one. Oh my goodness. What have I done in the last 5 years?
That's the best response I've had. That's hilarious.
Oh, that's a challenge. I don't know. I mean, this feels a bit personal. I'm always about the last 5 years. That's probably not exactly fair, but I'm an early riser. So I'm a big fan of getting up at 6 a.m., getting going. I'm pretty routine oriented. So I'll make a breakfast. I'll make a couple of eggs. Yeah. Everyone always laughs whenever they're like, oh, what'd you have for breakfast? And it's like, sometimes I'll make grits, sometimes I'll make, pancakes, whatever. But I think having that routine is important, but making time for yourself, I think that the older you get, the more you have on your calendar, I think the more time it's important to take some time for yourself, but also to think. So when I'm talking about taking time for yourself, I probably have my best ideas when I'm walking. So I'll usually try to carve out some time to go to the gym. It's like 4 or 5 blocks from my house. So a quick walk. So I'll go, but on that like short walk, I probably have some of the best ideas, or I problem solve, or I'm able to like think about and digest like what's been going on. Because if you just go in this world, like Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting, it's hard, right? You're not really processing a lot of information. So taking that time, you can start figuring out how to add value as opposed to just being a face like on a Zoom, which is easy to do. Like you're just back to back, you go on the next one, next one. And you don't really think about like, what'd you discuss? What are action items? Like what's really the right way to conduct yourself? What's our strategy? What's our 3 to 5 year plan here?
Yeah, that's great advice. I feel like Yuval Harari, who wrote Sapiens, one of his, he says the biggest risk to humanity is us not allowing ourselves to be bored and think.
Oh my God, right? That's so true. I mean, post-COVID, like we're just on Zoom meetings. I have a great guy I work with a lot, and he's a partner of ours. This guy sets up not hour-long meetings, half an hour-long meetings. And he's most days like booked back to back. And I'm just like, are you okay? Like that many meetings, I'm just like doing the math. Like how can you're rapidly moving from task to task. Like how are you able to process like everything you've done throughout the day? And he runs a startup, so he has to. Yeah. But I'm like, all right, first off, are you okay? Like are you all right? You gotta spend that time. You gotta take time for yourself. I feel like it's taboo in the US, but working for a European company, I see the other side where it's like, there's a lot of value in taking time off, heaven forbid more than 5 days. I'm not advocating my team takes 3-week vacations. That's a hard pill for me to swallow, but like there is value in doing that. Like you come back so differently recharged. Yeah. So there's a blend. I think there's a way to make the work environment a little bit less toxic.
Definitely a better balance than I think what we saw.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Last question I've got for you. What is the book or books you've given most as a gift and why?
Culture Map.
Culture Map. All right.
Yeah. So have you heard of this one before?
I haven't.
So when I joined Textkernel, I found myself routinely on leadership meetings and so for context, I lead North American sales. And so I have a counterpart that runs European sales. Stefan, great guy based off Frankfurt, Germany. But when I first started, we were a little bit more fractured. We had a guy that was head of France. Stefan was head of, essentially Germany and Benelux. And then we had another guy that was in Netherlands. And so we had, it was a diverse set of voices. And so I could not, as an American that's only worked for Americans, specifically a lot of East Coast companies, right? I was, had a certain mindset. And I remember I was talking to a good friend of mine, Joe Sr., and he was, and I was kind of talking about the challenges of some of these calls are just being like, I just can't understand like their perspective in some cases. And he's like, I just read a book about this. You got to read this. And so I read Culture Map, and it was like, so it kind of talks about like the different cultures and how it impacts the business climate and their business perspective. And they have like a whole section on the Dutch, which is great. A whole section on the French. And so, yeah, it's really good. Right. And so then like you could start figuring like, okay, like here's how they see it. Here's how they see the world. Right. Everyone has their
different lens. Yep.
Right. And once you realize that and you kind of get out of yourself, it was super helpful, and it really helps you, that kind of change perspective allows you to kind of think differently and say, hey, I'm not thinking locally, I'm thinking globally. How can we be a better company? How can we operate? Like, I hear what you're saying. This is fantastic. Let's try to incorporate and come up with good shared ideas. And it was foundational for me. Super helpful.
That's great. That's a great book recommendation. New one for me. So with that, any closing comments for the audience? Anything else you'd like to share?
No, I just small world. I can't believe we're both from the same area in Iowa, right?
Both born in Davenport, Iowa. Are you born there as well?
Yeah. Actually, no, technically it's Dubuque.
All right.
But I moved, when I was a kid, like 6, so close enough. But I think I love being on the podcast. Thank you for inviting me on a long time. We've been talking about this for, I feel like, forever now. So hopefully,
we're like a year deep on it, so it's nice to finally connect on it. Yeah,
schedules, right? They're no joke. But yeah, man, excited to be on here. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you at the next conference. Right, this Absolutely. Is where we all get to hang out now as adults.
That is it. So have a good one. Thanks so much for joining. Really appreciate it.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to The Staffing Show.